Blink Twice is a 2024 American psychological thriller film directed and produced by Zoe Kravitz in her directorial debut, from a screenplay she co-wrote with E.T. Feigenbaum. The film features an ensemble cast including Naomi Ackie, Channing Tatum, Christian Slater, Simon Rex, Adria Arjona, Haley Joel Osment, Kyle MacLachlan, Gina Davis, and Alia Shawkat. The story follows a group of people invited to the private island of a billionaire tech mogul, where unsettling and sinister events begin to unfold among the guests. The film premiered at the DGA Theatre in Los Angeles on August 8, 2024, before being released in the United States on August 23 by Amazon MGM Studios through Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer Pictures. Made on a budget of $20 million, it earned $48 million worldwide and was met with generally positive reviews from critics, who praised its atmosphere, performances, and Kravitz's direction. Frida, a nail artist and cocktail waitress, attends an exclusive event with her friend Jess. There she meets billionaire tech mogul Slater King, who has recently resigned as CEO under a cloud of scandal. Slater invites both women to his private island. Upon arrival, their phones are confiscated by Slater's assistant, Stacy. Also on the island are Slater's wealthy friends and associates, photographer Vic, private chef Cody, DJ Tom, and recent college graduate Lucas. 3 other women are present as well: a reality star Sarah, app developer Camilla, and lawyer Heather. The women are pampered with lavish accommodations, gift bags of perfume, exotic cocktails, and powerful hallucinogens. Frida finds herself in competition with Sarah for Slater's attention, while Jess notices strange memory lapses. The local staff all bear identical snake tattoos, and a maid cryptically calls Frida Red Rabbit. Meanwhile, Slater's therapist, Rich, arrives and is given one of the same red gift bags. During a party, Jess is bitten by a snake. She grows increasingly paranoid, telling Frida she wants to leave because she senses something sinister. Frida dismisses her concerns, enjoying the attention and luxury, and convinces Jess to stay. The next morning, Frida stumbles upon a cottage filled with identical red gift bags. The maid persuades her to drink snake venom, which triggers disturbing flashbacks. At breakfast, Frida notices Jess is missing, yet none of the other women remember her at all. Sarah later finds a lighter engraved with Jess's name. Though initially skeptical, she begins to believe Frida after realizing she too has suffered memory lapses. Investigating further, they discover the perfume is made from an indigenous island flower that erases memory, while snake venom counteracts its effects. Frida persuades Sarah to drink the venom, restoring her memories. They realize the truth: the women are being raped and assaulted by the men each night, their memories wiped clean afterward. Jess, immune because of the snake bite, was killed when her memories couldn't be erased. Frida and Sarah secretly administer the venom to the other women, restoring their memories. Horrified, Camilla and Heather join them in plotting escape. Frida infiltrates Slater's office, where she uncovers photos and records of previous victims, proving the abuse is part of a recurring pattern. At dinner, Frida and Sarah feign ignorance, distracting the men with a provocative dance while preparing to fight back. Camilla fatally stabs Tom, while Heather badly injures Vic before being shot by Slater's guard, Stan. Camilla is then killed by Slater. In the chaos, Stacy attacks Frida, forcing her to defend herself and kill Stacy. Sarah kills Stan and later Cody, while Lucas proves complicit through his inaction. Frida recalls that she had been to the island a year earlier, assaulted by Slater and his circle. She had fought back, biting off Vic's finger, before her memories were wiped. The maid recognized her from the distinctive red rabbit design on her nails. In the climax, Slater traps Frida in his villa. But Frida turns the tables by lacing his vape pen with the memory-erasing perfume. Disoriented, Slater panics as the villa burns around him. Frida and Sarah escape, leaving Slater alive but broken and Vic to die. Later, at a gala, a dazed Slater appears, still under the perfume's influence. Frida, now his wife and the CEO of his company, controls him by continuing to lace his vape with the memory-erasing formula. When Rich appears, recognizing the truth, Frida has him removed, now firmly in power and celebrated for her apparent success. Zoe Kravitz's directorial debut Blink Twice stands as one of the most audacious and provocative films of 2024, marking a bold entry into the psychological thriller genre that challenges audiences while establishing Kravitz as a formidable new voice in cinema. This comprehensive examination explores every facet of the film, from its controversial origins to its cultural impact, revealing how a story born from the urgency of the Me Too movement evolved into a complex meditation on power, memory, and survival. The film emerges from a particular moment in cultural history, beginning its journey in 2017 when Zoe Kravitz first conceived what would initially be titled Pussy Island. This provocative original title reflected the raw, uncompromising vision that Kravitz sought to bring to screen, a vision that would ultimately require significant navigation through the complexities of modern film distribution and audience reception. The transformation from Pussy Island to Blink Twice represents more than a simple name change. It embodies the ongoing negotiation between artistic vision and commercial viability that characterizes contemporary independent filmmaking within the studio's system. Kravitz's creative process was deeply influenced by the Harvey Weinstein revelations and the broader Me Too movement that reshaped Hollywood's understanding of power dynamics and sexual violence. Her script, co-written with E.T. Feigenbaum, underwent numerous revisions as the cultural landscape shifted and evolved. The filmmaker has acknowledged rewriting the screenplay a million times following the Weinstein allegations, demonstrating how real-world events can fundamentally reshape artistic expression. This iterative process resulted in a narrative that feels both timely and timeless, addressing contemporary concerns while drawing upon archetypal themes of predation and survival that resonate across cultures and generations. The casting of Channing Tatum as the film's central antagonist, Slater King, represents one of the project's most intriguing artistic choices. Tatum, known primarily for his charismatic roles in romantic comedies and action films, brings an unexpected complexity to the role of a billionaire tech mogul whose charming exterior conceals monstrous intentions. This casting against type serves multiple purposes within the film's thematic framework, challenging audiences' preconceptions about masculinity, power, and the facades that wealthy, influential men often maintain. Tatum's performance navigates the delicate balance between surface charm and underlying menace, creating a character who embodies the seductive nature of power while revealing its fundamentally predatory core. Naomi Ackie's casting as Frida, the film's protagonist, brings a fresh perspective to the final girl archetype that has long dominated horror and thriller cinema. Ackie, whose previous work includes acclaimed performances in Star Wars, The Rise of Skywalker and I Wanna Dance with Somebody, demonstrates remarkable range in portraying a character who undergoes profound transformation throughout the narrative. Frida's journey from vulnerable service worker to empowered survivor reflects broader themes about class, race, and gender that permeate the film's social commentary. Akkie's performance anchors the film's emotional core, providing audiences with a relatable entry point into increasingly surreal and disturbing circumstances. The supporting ensemble, featuring Christian Slater, Simon Rex, Adria Arjona, Haley Joel Osment, Kyle MacLachlan, Gina Davis, and Alia Shawkat, creates a carefully constructed ecosystem of complicity and victimization. Each performer brings distinct energy to their role, contributing to the film's exploration of how systemic abuse operates through networks of enablement and silence. Christian Slater's Vic embodies the entitled photographer who commodifies women through his lens, while Simon Rex's Cody represents the childhood friend whose loyalty blinds him to moral boundaries. These characters function not merely as plot devices but as representatives of different facets of toxic masculinity and female vulnerability within systems of power. The film's production design deserves particular attention for its role in creating the seductive yet menacing atmosphere that defines the island setting. Production designer Katie Byron crafts an environment that initially appears paradisiacal: lush landscapes, luxurious accommodations, and carefully curated spaces that suggest both wealth and taste. However, closer examination reveals subtle signs of surveillance and control that foreshadow the true nature of the island experience. The contrast between surface beauty and underlying horror reflects the film's central theme about the deceptive nature of privilege and the ways in which wealth can be weaponized to exploit vulnerability. Cinematographer Adam Newport Barrow employs a visual strategy that evolves throughout the film, beginning with bright, saturated imagery that suggests vacation luxury before gradually introducing more ominous elements. The camera work becomes increasingly invasive as the narrative progresses, reflecting Frida's growing awareness of her precarious situation. This visual evolution serves as a metaphor for the gradual revelation of truth, with the cinematography itself becoming a character in the story. The use of handheld cameras during moments of realization and violence creates an immediacy that places audiences directly within the character's experience of trauma and discovery. The film's editing, handled by Catherine J. Schubert, plays a crucial role in managing the complex temporal structure that defines the narrative. As characters' memories are systematically erased and restored, the editing must navigate between different states of consciousness and awareness. Schubert employs techniques that mirror the confusion and fragmentation experienced by the victims, using jump cuts, repetitive imagery, and temporal displacement to create a disorienting experience that reflects the character's psychological state. This editorial approach transforms the audience into participants in the memory manipulation process, creating empathy through shared confusion and gradual understanding. Chanda Dansi's musical score represents one of the film's most innovative elements, drawing inspiration from diverse sources including Japanese gagaku music, Igor Stravinsky's compositions, Indonesian drumming, and even the theme from the television series Fantasy Island. This eclectic musical palette creates an otherworldly atmosphere that supports the film's exploration of reality and illusion. Dansi's compositions move seamlessly between beauty and discord, reflecting the dual nature of the island experience and the characters' shifting perceptions of their situation. The score's incorporation of natural sounds and electronic elements creates a soundscape that feels both organic and artificially constructed, mirroring the film's themes about authenticity and manipulation. The narrative structure of Blink Twice employs a carefully calibrated revelation process that maintains audience engagement while building toward its devastating climax. The first act establishes the seductive world of privilege and luxury, introducing audiences to characters who appear to be living out fantasies of wealth and freedom. This initial presentation deliberately mirrors the marketing strategies of luxury brands and lifestyle influencers, creating recognition that makes the subsequent revelations more impactful. The film's pacing allows audiences to become complicit in the characters' initial enchantment before forcing them to confront the reality of systematic abuse. The central conceit of memory manipulation through the indigenous flower perfume provides both a narrative device and a metaphor for how trauma affects memory and perception. This fantastical element grounds itself in real-world understanding of how traumatic experiences can fragment memory and how perpetrators often rely on victims' confusion and self-doubt to maintain control. The film's use of this device explores themes about testimony, evidence, and the ways in which society often questions women's accounts of assault and abuse. The perfume becomes a literalization of gaslighting, representing how perpetrators manipulate their victims' understanding of reality. The snake venom antidote introduces elements of folk wisdom and indigenous knowledge that contrast with the technological sophistication of Slater's operation. This juxtaposition suggests themes about natural versus artificial, traditional versus modern, and the ways in which ancient wisdom can provide solutions to contemporary problems. The maid character, who possesses this crucial knowledge, represents a connection to the island's pre-colonial history and indigenous culture that exists outside the sphere of Slater's influence. Her role in Frida's eventual liberation suggests that resistance to oppression often emerges from marginalized communities and traditional knowledge systems. The film's exploration of complicity extends beyond the obvious perpetrators to examine how systems of privilege create networks of enablement. Stacy's character, played by Gina Davis, embodies the complex position of women who benefit from proximity to power while remaining vulnerable to its abuse. Her ultimate choice to defend the system that oppresses her reflects real-world dynamics in which some victims become advocates for their abusers, particularly when their survival depends on maintaining their position within abusive structures. Davis brings nuance to this difficult role, avoiding simple vilification while acknowledging the character's responsibility for perpetuating harm. The revelation sequence in which the women recover their memories serves multiple narrative and thematic functions. On a plot level, it provides the information necessary for audiences to understand the full scope of the abuse and manipulation. Thematically, it represents the power of shared testimony and collective action in confronting systematic oppression. The process by which each woman confronts her own victimization and chooses to act reflects real-world movements in which survivors find strength through community and mutual support. The film suggests that individual resistance, while heroic, requires collective action to achieve lasting change. The violent climax of Blink Twice has generated considerable critical discussion, with some reviewers questioning whether the revenge fantasy elements undermine the film's more serious social commentary. However, this criticism may miss the strategic function of violence within the narrative structure. The film's violence is not gratuitous but rather serves as a cathartic response to systematic abuse and a representation of justified anger. The deaths of the male perpetrators occur not as sadistic punishment but as necessary self-defense and protection of future victims. This distinction is crucial to understanding the film's moral framework and its relationship to broader discussions about violence in cinema. The character arc of Lucas, played by Levin Hawke, provides an interesting case study in passive complicity and the possibility of redemption. His youth and apparent innocence initially position him as potentially salvageable, yet his inability to take meaningful action against the abuse he witnesses ultimately condemns him. His fate suggests that passive complicity in systematic abuse carries moral weight equal to active participation, challenging audiences to consider their own responses to witnessed injustice. The film refuses to provide easy absolution for those who remain silent in the face of clear wrongdoing. The transformation of Frida from victim to survivor to powerful antagonist in the film's epilogue represents one of its most controversial elements. Some critics have interpreted this conclusion as an undermining of the film's feminist message, suggesting that Frida's assumption of power within the existing system represents a failure to challenge that system's fundamental problems. However, alternative readings suggest that Frida's position as CEO represents a strategic infiltration of power structures for the purpose of preventing future abuse. Her removal of Rich from the gala and her apparent control over Slater's compromised mental state suggest ongoing vigilance and protection of potential victims. The film's handling of memory and trauma draws upon contemporary understanding of how the brain processes traumatic experiences. The fragmented, nonlinear nature of recovered memories reflects clinical knowledge about trauma's impact on memory formation and recall. The perfume device serves as a literalization of dissociation and other psychological defense mechanisms that survivors often employ to cope with overwhelming experiences. This approach demonstrates sophisticated understanding of trauma psychology and avoids common cinematic misconceptions about how memory functions in traumatic situations. The production's choice to film in Mexico's Yucatán and Quintana Roo regions provides both practical and thematic benefits. These locations offer the lush, tropical aesthetic necessary for the island setting while carrying historical associations with colonization and exploitation that resonate with the film's themes. The beauty of these landscapes contrasts with the horror of the events that unfold within them. creating cognitive dissonance that mirrors the character's experience of the island as both paradise and prison. The specific choice of these regions, with their complex histories of indigenous culture and colonial domination, adds layers of meaning to the narrative's exploration of power and exploitation. The film's relationship to genre conventions deserves extended examination, as Blink Twice simultaneously embraces and subverts expectations established by horror and thriller cinema. The isolated island setting recalls classic horror films, while the tech billionaire antagonist reflects contemporary anxieties about Silicon Valley power and influence. The memory manipulation element introduces science fiction concepts, while the revenge climax draws upon slasher film conventions. This genre flexibility allows the film to engage with multiple cinematic traditions while creating something distinctively original. The costume design by Sarah Edwards contributes significantly to the film's thematic development, using fashion choices to communicate character status, vulnerability, and transformation. The luxurious clothing provided to the women guests serves as both genuine hospitality and a form of objectification, transforming them into decorative elements within Slater's constructed paradise. The progression from glamorous party wear to practical survival clothing reflects the character's evolution from passive victims to active agents. Frida's final costume choices in the epilogue, suggesting business success and authority, complete her transformation arc while raising questions about whether she has truly escaped the system or simply learned to manipulate it. The film's exploration of technology and surveillance reflects contemporary anxieties about privacy, consent, and digital manipulation. Slater's confiscation of phones serves practical narrative purposes while symbolizing the isolation necessary for systematic abuse. The photographs discovered in Slater's office represent both documentation of crimes and trophies of conquest, reflecting how perpetrators often collect evidence of their violations. The non-functional phones that Frida discovers suggest that escape requires more than simply regaining access to communication technology. It requires fundamental changes in power structures and social awareness. The international release strategy employed by Amazon MGM Studios and Warner Bros. Pictures demonstrates the complex economics of contemporary film distribution. The decision to release trigger warnings represents an unusual step for major studios and reflects growing awareness of trauma-informed practices in media consumption. This approach acknowledges the film's potentially disturbing content while respecting audience autonomy in making viewing decisions. The controversy surrounding these warnings reveals ongoing cultural tensions about content advisory practices and the responsibility of entertainment companies to protect vulnerable consumers. The film's box office performance, grossing $48 million worldwide against a $20 million production budget, demonstrates the commercial viability of challenging content when properly supported by marketing and distribution. The relatively modest opening weekend numbers reflect both the film's difficult subject matter and the competitive late summer release environment. However, the film's eventual profitability suggests that audiences are willing to engage with complex, uncomfortable themes when presented within compelling narrative frameworks. This commercial success may encourage studios to support similar projects that combine social commentary with genre entertainment. Critical reception of Blink Twice reveals significant divisions within the film criticism community about how to evaluate entertainment that combines serious social issues with genre conventions. Positive reviews praise Kravitz's directorial confidence, the film's visual style, and its willingness to confront difficult themes without simplification or false comfort. Negative reviews criticize the film's tonal inconsistencies, its reliance on genre conventions, and what some perceive as heavy-handed social commentary. These divergent responses reflect broader cultural debates about the relationship between entertainment and activism, and the responsibility of artists to provide solutions rather than simply identifying problems. The film's engagement with current events and social movements positions it within a broader context of post-#MeToo cinema that seeks to address sexual violence and and abuse of power. Films like Promising Young Woman, The Assistant, and She Said have similarly attempted to translate contemporary social awareness into cinematic storytelling. Blink Twice distinguishes itself through its genre approach and its focus on systematic rather than individual abuse, but it participates in the same cultural conversation about how cinema can contribute to social change and awareness. The performance of Channing Tatum deserves additional analysis as it represents a significant departure from his established screen persona. His previous roles have typically emphasized his physical attractiveness and comedic timing, creating audience expectations that work against his character's predatory nature. This casting choice forces audiences to confront their own assumptions about charisma and trustworthiness, particularly regarding attractive, wealthy men. Tatum's performance navigates the challenge of maintaining enough charm to make Slater's initial appeal believable while revealing the calculating coldness beneath the surface. The film's treatment of class dynamics adds another layer to its social commentary, examining how economic inequality creates conditions for systematic abuse. Frida's position as a service worker makes her particularly vulnerable to Slater's manipulation, as her lack of resources limits her options for resistance or escape. The film suggests that economic desperation makes individuals more susceptible to exploitation while wealth provides perpetrators with tools for control and concealment. This analysis extends beyond gender-based violence to encompass broader questions about how capitalism creates and maintains systems of oppression. The soundtrack's incorporation of licensed music from artists like LCD Sound System, James Brown, and Rufus featuring Chaka Khan creates cultural references that ground the film in specific historical and social contexts. These musical choices evoke associations with liberation movements, celebration, and resistance that contrast ironically with the character's actual circumstances. The juxtaposition of uplifting, empowering music with scenes of abuse and manipulation creates cognitive dissonance that enhances the film's emotional impact. While commenting on how popular culture can be weaponized to obscure systemic problems, the film's production timeline, spanning from initial conception in 2017 to theatrical release in 2024, reflects the challenges of bringing controversial content to mainstream audiences. The extended development period allowed for multiple script revisions that incorporated evolving cultural awareness about sexual violence and consent. This iterative process resulted in a more sophisticated and nuanced exploration of these themes than might have been possible in a faster production timeline. The extended development also allowed for careful casting and crew selection that supported the film's vision and themes. Zoe Kravitz's position as both director and performer creates interesting dynamics within the film's production and reception. Her cameo appearance as a flight attendant demonstrates confidence in her material while maintaining focus on the central narrative. Her background as a performer informs her directorial approach, creating performances that feel authentic and emotionally grounded rather than purely functional. This dual perspective also contributes to the film's understanding of how women navigate spaces dominated by male power and influence. The film's relationship to contemporary horror cinema deserves extended examination, as it employs many conventions of the genre while serving different thematic purposes. The isolated location, systematic elimination of characters, and final girl survival narrative all draw upon established horror frameworks. However, the film's focus on realistic rather than supernatural threats, its emphasis on systematic rather than random violence, and its social commentary distinguish it from traditional horror offerings. This hybrid approach allows the film to benefit from genre expectations while subverting them for more complex purposes. The international distribution strategy reflects the global nature of contemporary film economics while acknowledging regional differences in content sensitivity. The decision to employ different release strategies in various markets demonstrates awareness that cultural attitudes toward explored sexual violence and feminist themes vary significantly across different societies. This approach maximizes the film's commercial potential while respecting local cultural contexts and regulatory environments. The film's editing strategy employs repetition and circular structure to mirror the character's experience of memory manipulation and recovered awareness. Repeated images, dialogue, and situations create a sense of copyright vu that places audiences within the character's confused mental state. This technique transforms what could be a straightforward revenge thriller into a complex meditation on consciousness, memory, and the nature of reality. The editing becomes a character in itself, guiding audience understanding while maintaining empathy with the victim's experience. The production design's attention to detail creates a fully realized world that supports the film's themes while maintaining visual appeal. The luxury goods, artwork, and architecture presented on the island reflect specific aesthetic choices that communicate wealth, taste, and cultural sophistication. However, subtle details suggest surveillance, control, and containment that foreshadowed the true nature of the island experience. This layered approach to production design rewards careful viewing while supporting the film's exploration of how surface appearances can disguise underlying horror. The film's engagement with social media culture and influencer economics reflects contemporary anxieties about how digital platforms commodify personal experience and authentic emotion. The character's initial attraction to the island experience mirrors the appeal of luxury lifestyle content that dominates social media platforms. The confiscation of phones serves narrative purposes while commenting on how digital disconnection can facilitate abuse and isolation. This analysis extends to broader questions about how social media culture affects authentic human connection and emotional well-being. The casting of Alia Shawkat as Jess provides crucial emotional anchoring for the film's first act while serving as a catalyst for Frida's eventual awakening. Shawkat's performance creates a character who embodies healthy skepticism and protective friendship, establishing a standard of normal social interaction that makes the island's manipulative dynamics more apparent. Her character's fate serves as both emotional motivation for Frida and a warning to audiences about the consequences of resisting systematic abuse without adequate support or resources. The film's cinematography employs color palette progression to support its thematic development, beginning with warm, saturated tones that suggest tropical paradise before gradually introducing cooler, more ominous hues. This visual evolution mirrors the characters' changing perception of their situation while guiding audience emotional response. The use of natural lighting during exterior sequences contrasts with more artificial illumination in interior scenes, suggesting themes about authenticity versus performance and the distinction between public and private behavior. The performance of Kyle MacLachlan as Rich the therapist deserves particular attention as it represents professional complicity in systematic abuse. MacLachlan brings gravitas and apparent respectability to a character who represents the corruption of helping professions by wealth and influence. His character demonstrates how perpetrators recruit professional accomplices who provide legitimacy and cover for their activities. The therapist's presence on the island suggests that even healing professions can be weaponized to facilitate abuse when practitioners prioritize access to power over ethical responsibility. The film's treatment of indigenous knowledge through the maid character and the snake venom antidote suggests themes about colonialism and cultural appropriation that extend beyond the immediate narrative. The island setting, with its indigenous flora and local workers, represents a space where colonial exploitation continues in contemporary forms. Slater's appropriation of indigenous knowledge for his abuse scheme reflects broader patterns of cultural exploitation while the maid's resistance suggests the persistence of traditional wisdom and values despite systemic oppression. The film's exploration of pharmaceutical manipulation through the perfume device reflects contemporary concerns about consent and chemical substances. The systematic drug drugging of victims without their knowledge represents a literalization of date rape drug scenarios while exploring how memory-altering substances can be used to facilitate ongoing abuse. This element of the plot engages with real-world discussions about chemical submission and the ways in which perpetrators use substances to overcome resistance and impair testimony. The economic subtext of the film examines how extreme wealth creates opportunities for systematic abuse while providing resources for concealment and escape from consequences. Slater's private island represents the ultimate expression of economic privilege in a space completely removed from legal oversight or social accountability. The film suggests that concentrated wealth inevitably leads to corruption and abuse, as unlimited resources eliminate the normal constraints that prevent antisocial behavior. The film's sound design creates an immersive environment that supports its psychological themes while maintaining tropical atmosphere. Natural sounds are waves, birds, insects that create authenticity while occasionally becoming ominous or overwhelming during moments of stress or realization. The contrast between pleasant ambient sound and disturbing audio elements mirrors the contrast between the island's surface appeal and underlying horror. This audio strategy places audiences within the character's sensory experience while building tension through subtle manipulation of familiar sounds. The film's makeup and hair design contribute to character development while supporting themes about identity and transformation. The glamorous styling provided to the women guests serves as both hospitality and objectification, transforming them into decorative elements within Slater's fantasy. The progression from elaborate styling to more natural appearances reflects the character's movement from performed femininity to authentic agency. Frida's various hairstyles throughout the film mark her psychological transformation from victim to survivor to powerful agent. The film's relationship to contemporary feminist theory deserves extended analysis, as it engages with multiple strands of feminist thought while avoiding simple didacticism. The exploration of sexual violence draws upon radical feminist analysis of patriarchal power structures while the class dynamics engage with materialist feminist understanding of economic oppression. The international setting and indigenous elements suggest engagement with intersectional and decolonial feminism that recognizes multiple systems of oppression. This theoretical sophistication elevates the film beyond simple revenge fantasy into complex social commentary. The performance of Adria Arjona as Sarah provides crucial character development while representing themes about competition and solidarity among women. Her initial rivalry with Frida over Slater's attention reflects how patriarchal systems create competition among women for male approval and resources. Her eventual alliance with Frida demonstrates the possibility of moving beyond competition toward mutual support and collective action. Arjona's performance navigates this character evolution while maintaining authenticity and avoiding simple role reversals. The film's production during the COVID-19 pandemic added layers of complexity to both practical filmmaking and thematic interpretation. The health protocols necessary for safe production mirror some of the isolation and control themes within the narrative, while the pandemic's impact on social interaction and mental health adds resonance to the film's exploration of gaslighting and reality manipulation. The completed film serves as both entertainment and historical document of a particular moment in cultural development. The film's engagement with trauma-informed storytelling practices reflects growing awareness within the entertainment industry about responsible representation of sexual violence. The trigger warnings, careful handling of assault scenes, and focus on survivor agency rather than victimization demonstrate sophisticated understanding of how media representation affects real-world survivors. This approach balances artistic expression with social responsibility, creating entertainment that acknowledges serious social problems without exploiting them for shock value. The editing room decisions that shaped the final narrative demonstrate the complex process of translating challenging source material into accessible entertainment. The balance between revelation and concealment, the pacing of violent sequences, and the management of complex temporal structures all required careful consideration to maintain audience engagement while serving thematic purposes. These technical decisions ultimately determine whether challenging content succeeds as both entertainment and social commentary. The film's international reception reveals cultural differences in attitudes toward sexual violence, feminism, and genre entertainment. Reviews from different markets demonstrate varying levels of comfort with the film's explicit content and social commentary, reflecting broader cultural differences in discussing these topics. This international perspective suggests that Blink Twice participates in global conversations about gender, power, and violence while acknowledging that these conversations occur within different cultural contexts and frameworks. The film's eventual streaming release will likely expand its audience and cultural impact beyond theatrical viewership. The home viewing environment may allow for different types of engagement with the challenging content, potentially facilitating discussion and analysis that might not occur in theatrical settings. The availability of the film across multiple platforms and regions will determine its long-term cultural influence and its contribution to ongoing social conversations about consent, power, and justice. The legacy of Blink Twice within Zoe Kravitz's developing career as a filmmaker will depend on both its commercial success and critical reception. The film establishes her as a director capable of handling complex, controversial material while maintaining visual style and narrative coherence. Future projects will reveal whether this debut represents a singular statement or the beginning of a sustained engagement with social issues through genre filmmaking. The film's contribution to contemporary cinema lies in its successful combination of entertainment value with serious social commentary, demonstrating that challenging content can achieve both commercial viability and cultural impact. Its influence on future projects that attempt similar combinations of genre entertainment and social activism will help determine whether Blink Twice represents an isolated success or a new model for socially conscious genre filmmaking. In conclusion, Blink Twice stands as a significant achievement in contemporary cinema, successfully translating urgent social concerns into compelling entertainment while maintaining artistic integrity and commercial appeal. Zoe Kravitz's directorial debut demonstrates sophisticated understanding of both filmmaking craft and social dynamics, creating a work that functions simultaneously as thriller, social commentary, and artistic statement. The film's exploration of memory, power, and survival resonates beyond its immediate narrative to engage with broader cultural conversations about consent, justice, and systemic change. While its controversial elements may limit its appeal to some audiences, its willingness to confront difficult topics without simplification or false comfort establishes it as essential viewing for understanding contemporary cinema's engagement with social issues. The film's success suggests that audiences are willing to engage with challenging content when presented within skilled artistic frameworks, encouraging future projects that combine entertainment with social consciousness. Blink Twice ultimately succeeds as both individual artistic achievement and cultural intervention, contributing to ongoing conversations about gender, power, and resistance while establishing Zoe Kravitz as a filmmaker capable of transforming social urgency into compelling cinema. Blink Twice emerged in 2024 as one of the more intriguing entries into the thriller and psychological drama landscape, a film that combined glamour, suspense, and biting social commentary into a glossy package that instantly drew both admiration and controversy. Directed by Zoe Kravitz in her feature directorial debut, the project had been in development for several years under different working titles and concepts before reaching the big screen. The idea originated from Kravitz's fascination with the way power dynamics play out in closed spaces, particularly when money, privilege, and desire intermingle. The narrative she envisioned was one that would peel back the seductive layers of luxury to reveal the predatory darkness beneath. This thematic core set the tone for the casting process, production design, musical scoring, and ultimately the way audiences would interpret and discuss the film. Casting was a crucial element in bringing this story to life. From the beginning, Zoe Kravitz knew she wanted to assemble a group of actors who could embody the contrast between outward charm and hidden menace. Channing Tatum was one of the earliest names attached to the project. Known for his charisma, physicality, and ability to effortlessly blend humor with intensity, Tatum was cast as Slater King, the enigmatic tech billionaire at the heart of the story. His involvement added both star power and a sense of unpredictability, since audiences were used to seeing him in lighter roles and would be intrigued to watch him explore darker territory. Alongside Tatum, Naomi Ackie was cast in the lead role of Frida, a young woman who becomes entangled in King's seductive but sinister world. Akkie's previous performances demonstrated her range and emotional depth, and her ability to portray both vulnerability and strength made her a compelling anchor for the audience's journey. The dynamic between Ackie and Tatum was essential, and their chemistry during early screen tests reportedly convinced Kravitz and the producers that they had found the right pairing to carry the film. The supporting cast added further dimension to the story. Adria Arjona was cast as Sarah, Frida's close friend whose decisions spark much of the film's tension. With her natural magnetism and expressive screen presence, Arjona added warmth and danger in equal measure. Haley Joel Osment appeared in a smaller but memorable role, surprising audiences who remembered his child star days by taking on a character steeped in cynicism and greed. Kyle MacLachlan, with his history of playing menacing authority figures, was cast as one of the shadowy backers of Slater King's empire, bringing gravitas and menace. Each member of the ensemble was chosen for their ability to play dual roles on the surface, characters enjoying privilege and pleasure, but underneath, individuals complicit in manipulation and exploitation. The development of Blink Twice was long and meticulous. Kravitz had been writing and reworking the screenplay for years before securing the backing of Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer and Amazon. She collaborated closely with E.T. Feigenbaum, who co-wrote the screenplay, and together they shaped a narrative that balanced entertainment with a sharp critique of wealth and power. Early drafts leaned more towards satire, but over time the story evolved into a thriller with psychological horror elements, allowing for greater suspense and tension. The project was originally titled Pussy Island, a provocative name intended to highlight the themes of objectification and exploitation within the plot. However, as the release date approached, the studio and filmmakers opted for the title Blink Twice, a phrase that suggested urgency, coded danger, and hidden message, some more in line with the psychological thriller branding. The change in title also ensured broader appeal without diluting the film's provocative undertones. Filming Blink Twice presented both artistic opportunities and logistical challenges. The majority of the movie takes place on a luxurious private island, which meant location scouting was crucial. The production ultimately used a combination of practical island settings and carefully constructed sets that blended opulence with isolation. The design team focused on creating spaces that looked stunning at first glance: modern villas, infinity pools, private beaches, but carried an undercurrent of unease. The architecture was deliberately cold and imposing despite its beauty, reflecting the hollowness of Slater King's empire. Cinematographer Adam Newport-Berra captured this duality with sleek white shots that showcased the island's beauty, contrasted with claustrophobic close-ups that heightened the tension in interpersonal scenes. Kravitz emphasized that she wanted the audience to feel seduced and trapped at the same time, much like the characters. The filming process brought its own share of challenges. Shooting in tropical conditions meant dealing with unpredictable weather, logistical delays, and the difficulty of maintaining continuity in natural light. Yet the cast and crew adapted, and many later noted that the physical environment added authenticity to the performances. The actors were genuinely isolated for long stretches during production, which enhanced the intensity of their on-screen relationships. Naomi Ackie and Adria Arjona, in particular, spent weeks immersed in their characters' friendship, rehearsing emotional scenes in between physically demanding shoots in the heat. Channing Tatum embraced his role as Slater King by embodying both charm and menace, often improvising subtle gestures that made the character simultaneously alluring and disturbing. Zoe Kravitz's directing style was reportedly collaborative, but firmer. She encouraged input from her actors while maintaining a clear vision of the story's psychological beats. Music played a vital role in shaping the mood of Blink Twice. The score combined electronic pulses with unsettling ambient tones, blurring the line between seduction and menace. Kravitz wanted the soundtrack to reflect both the allure of the island lifestyle and the creeping dread beneath the surface. The result was a soundscape that often lulled the audience into a false sense of security before erupting into discordant tones that signaled danger. Songs were carefully chosen to enhance key scenes, from party sequences that highlighted decadence to quieter moments where Frida and Sarah confronted their fears. The music also included contributions from contemporary artists whose work resonated with themes of power, desire, and control, giving the film a modern edge while ensuring its commentary felt grounded in the cultural present. Blink Twice's release was a carefully orchestrated event. It premiered in theaters worldwide in 2024, accompanied by a marketing campaign that leaned into its aura of mystery. Trailers emphasized glamour, tension, and Channing Tatum's commanding presence, while deliberately keeping many plot details hidden. The promotional materials played with the imagery of blinking, secret codes, and the duality of paradise and prison. Early buzz focused heavily on Zoe Kravitz's debut as a director, with critics and audiences eager to see how she would transition from acting to filmmaking. The change of title from Pussy Island to Blink Twice was also widely discussed, with some fans disappointed by the toned-down name while others appreciated the subtler psychological emphasis. Upon release, Blink Twice received a range of reactions. Critics praised Kravitz's confident direction, the film's lush visuals, and Naomi Ackie's standout performance. Many noted that, while the film occasionally leaned into familiar thriller tropes, it distinguished itself through its social commentary and the way it dissected wealth, privilege, and exploitation. Some reviewers highlighted the influence of films like The Talented Mr. Ripley and Eyes Wide Shut, pointing out how Blink Twice situated itself within a tradition of stories about seduction and danger among the wealthy elite. Audience reactions were similarly mixed but passionate, as some were drawn into the film's style and themes, while others felt its commentary was heavy-handed. At the box office, Blink Twice performed respectably, though it was not a record-breaking blockbuster. Its mid-range budget meant that profitability depended on steady international performance and streaming deals. The film's strong cast and topical subject matter helped attract global attention, particularly on streaming platforms where word of mouth encouraged further viewership. While its theatrical run was moderate, its long-term cultural presence seemed more assured, as discussions about its themes proliferated across social media. Memes and online commentary played a surprisingly large role in extending Blink Twice's cultural impact. The phrase "Blink Twice" quickly became shorthand online for signaling discomfort or hidden distress, often used humorously in unrelated contexts. Screenshots of Channing Tatum's unsettling charm circulated widely, sometimes paired with captions mocking real-world billionaires and tech moguls. Naomi Ackie's character became a focal point for memes about survival instincts, bad decisions at parties, and the perils of trusting charismatic strangers. The film's combination of glamour and horror lent itself well to internet parody, and soon TikTok edits, Twitter threads, and Instagram memes ensured that Blink Twice remained part of the cultural conversation beyond its theatrical run. Analysis of Blink Twice often centered on its exploration of power and consent. Scholars and critics noted how the film exposed the hidden violence beneath luxury, and how the island served as a metaphor for the insularity of the ultra-wealthy. Zoe Kravitz's perspective as a woman director in Hollywood was also part of the discussion, with many praising her for taking on themes of exploitation with both style and sharp critique. Others debated whether the film fully succeeded in balancing its glossy entertainment with its starker commentary, pointing out moments where spectacle seemed to outweigh substance. Regardless, The film was recognized as an ambitious and thought-provoking debut that positioned Kravitz as a filmmaker to watch. Blink Twice maintained a steady presence in cultural discussions long after its initial release, partly because it occupied an unusual space in the contemporary cinematic landscape. On one hand, it carried the trappings of a mainstream studio thriller, with glamorous stars, exotic locations, and a slick marketing push. On the other, it carried a distinctly auteur-driven sensibility, shaped by Zoe Kravitz's perspective and willingness to infuse a genre film with layered social critique. This balancia, or in some critics' eyes, imbalancia, became one of the major talking points surrounding the film. While some viewed it as a gripping and stylish thriller with teeth, others considered it a mixed bag of ideas, simultaneously fascinating and frustrating. The development history itself became part of the film's story. The original working title, Pussy Island, had been a lightning rod for commentary since it was announced. Some celebrated the audacity of the title, seeing it as a bold critique of misogyny and the commodification of women. Others found it too provocative, potentially distracting from the film's content. By the time it was retitled Blink Twice, conversations had already been swirling about how the name change would impact its branding. The studio likely anticipated potential backlash from mainstream audiences or media outlets, where a Morisquet copyright title could complicate marketing. The new name, however, was more enigmatic and open to interpretation, giving audiences something to speculate about before even entering the theater. This shift reflected the delicate balancing act between Kravitz's artistic intentions and the commercial realities of releasing a film through a major studio's system. When looking at the production process, one of the most interesting aspects was how much emphasis was placed on atmosphere. Kravitz and her team were determined to avoid letting the island setting slip into cliché copyright. They wanted the location to feel both like a dream and a nightmare, a paradise that slowly reveals itself as a trap. The design choices leaned heavily into contrasts: rooms filled with minimalist but expensive furniture that seemed sterile, beaches that looked breathtakingly beautiful yet isolated, party scenes that glittered with decadence but hinted at danger. Every detail of the production design was intended to reinforce the sense of duality that ran throughout the story. The cinematography also reflected this approach. Adam Newport Barrow employed a shifting visual language depending on where the story was at a given moment. Early scenes of arrival on the island were shot with luminous, expansive frames that emphasized the grandeur of the setting. As the narrative progressed, the visuals tightened, with closer shots, shallow focus, and framing that boxed characters in. This evolution mirrored the journey of Frida and Sarah, who entered what seemed like a glamorous adventure only to realize they were trapped in something sinister. Lighting was used strategically, with warm golden tones at parties that gave way to colder, harsher shades during moments of revelation and confrontation. The music was equally important in shaping tone. The score was deliberately crafted to be both seductive and unsettling, weaving between ambient soundscapes and more aggressive compositions that punctuated moments of dread. One of the standout elements was how the music often seemed to pulse with the rhythm of a heartbeat, reinforcing the themes of danger and survival. Party sequences made use of upbeat tracks that reflected hedonism, while quieter moments leaned on dissonant tones to keep the audience on edge. Kravitz wanted the sound design to play with the audience's subconscious, lulling them into comfort only to jolt them with sudden discord. This manipulation of sound became a central feature of how the film built suspense. Reception to Blink Twice was divided but passionate. Some critics hailed it as a stylish and bold directorial debut, praising Kravitz's confidence behind the camera and her ability to orchestrate both performances and visuals with precision. Naomi Ackie received widespread acclaim for her portrayal of Frida, with many calling it a star-making turn that showcased her emotional range and intensity. Channing Tatum also drew praise for his performance, with critics noting that he balanced his natural charisma with an unsettling undercurrent that made Slater King both magnetic and repulsive. However, not all reviews were glowing. Some critics argued that the screenplay was uneven, with certain themes spelled out too bluntly or subplots left underdeveloped. Others felt that, while the film was visually striking, it sometimes prioritized style over substance. These criticisms didn't diminish the conversation around the film but rather amplified it, as debates about its strengths and weaknesses fueled its cultural footprint. At the box office, Blink Twice performed moderately well. Its appeal as a star-driven thriller helped it secure solid opening numbers, though it didn't break into blockbuster territory. Its mid-range budget, however, meant that it didn't need massive returns to be considered a success. International markets responded favorably, particularly in Europe where stylish thrillers often perform better than in the United States. Streaming deals also boosted the film's visibility, allowing it to reach audiences who might not have been drawn to theaters. In many ways, the film's long-term success hinged less on immediate box office numbers and more on its continued presence in cultural conversations, something it achieved through both its subject matter and the online discourse it inspired. Memes and viral content became one of the most fascinating aftershocks of the film's release. The simple phrase "blink twice" lent itself to endless reinterpretations across social media platforms. Viewers jokingly used it to comment on awkward or uncomfortable situations in everyday life, often accompanied by reaction images or clips from the film. Channing Tatum's intense stare became meme fodder, with users comparing it to the unsettling personas of real-world tech billionaires. Naomi Aki's expressions of realization or suspicion were similarly repurposed as reaction memes, symbolizing everything from awkward dating scenarios to workplace politics. These humorous reinterpretations helped the film stay in the spotlight, keeping its title circulating in pop culture beyond its theatrical run. Analysis of the film often returned to its themes of power, privilege, and exploitation. Scholars highlighted the way Kravitz used the island setting as a microcosm of wealth's ability to isolate and corrupt. The private island, ostensibly a paradise, became a metaphor for the bubble of privilege that shields the wealthy from accountability. The dynamic between Slater King and the women invited to his island illustrated the intersection of charm and coercion, desire and danger. Many saw the film as a commentary on contemporary conversations about consent, manipulation, and the abuse of power within elite circles. Some even linked its themes to real-world scandals involving tech moguls and billionaires, drawing parallels between fiction and current events. Zoe Kravitz's debut as a director became another focal point of discussion. Industry observers noted that while many actors have made the transition to directing, Kravitz brought a particularly distinctive vision to her project. Her willingness to tackle difficult themes and blend them with mainstream entertainment marked her as a filmmaker unafraid to take risks. Interviews around the release revealed her commitment to telling stories that probe at uncomfortable truths while remaining stylish and engaging. This duality of entertainment and critique was a thread that critics and fans alike identified as central to her artistic identity. Even with mixed reviews, Blink Twice secured a reputation as a conversation starter. Its bold themes, memorable performances, and glossy aesthetic ensured that it would remain a point of reference in discussions about contemporary thrillers. Whether audiences loved it or criticized it, few dismissed it outright. Instead, it inspired debates about storytelling, representation, and the role of style in conveying substance. This lasting impact suggested that while Blink Twice may not have been a runaway commercial hit, it had achieved something arguably more enduring, a cultural presence that extended far beyond its theatrical run. Blink Twice became one of those films that people didn't just watch and forget. Instead, they carried the imagery, the performances, and the themes into discussions long after leaving the theater. One of the key reasons for this lingering effect was how Zoe Kravitz framed the story around familiar yet unsettling dynamics. By situating her characters in a seductive environment filled with luxury and promise, she invited audiences into a space that felt almost aspirational, only to gradually reveal its darker undercurrents. This narrative structure mirrored the experiences of many characters in the film itself, whose initial enchantment followed by chilling revelation. It was a storytelling choice that rewarded attentive viewers and invited repeated interpretations. Casting continued to be one of the strongest talking points surrounding the film. Naomi Ackie's portrayal of Frida was not only lauded for its intensity but also for how it allowed audiences to project themselves into her situation. She was not written as a passive victim but as someone constantly assessing her circumstances, recalibrating her instincts, and struggling to balance trust with caution. Her emotional authenticity grounded the film, providing a human anchor amid the excess and spectacle. Ackie's physical performance also played a major role in her effectiveness, as small gestures, glances, and silences often communicated as much as dialogue, allowing her to convey internal conflict without overselling it. Many critics highlighted how this performance signaled her emergence as one of the most compelling leading actresses of her generation. Channing Tatum's Slater King offered a sharp contrast. On paper, he was written as a tech billionaire with a carefully curated aura of charm and generosity. Tatum's interpretation leaned heavily into that magnetism but undercut it with flashes of menace that were sometimes subtle, sometimes overt. His ability to oscillate between warmth and coldness within a single scene made his presence unpredictable, which heightened tension whenever he appeared. Viewers were never sure whether he was about to make a friendly gesture or reveal a manipulative scheme. This unpredictability mirrored real-world anxieties about powerful figures who mask exploitative behavior behind charisma and wealth. Tatum's decision to embrace the ambiguity of the role rather than play him as a straightforward villain added depth and made Slater King one of the more memorable characters in recent thrillers. Adria Arjona's Sarah provided a critical counterpart to Frida. As the more adventurous and impulsive of the two friends, Sarah embodied both the allure and the danger of succumbing to the island's temptations. Her choices propelled much of the plot's tension, and Arjona's performance captured the push and pull between indulgence and fear. The chemistry between Arjona and Ackie was particularly crucial, as their friendship was the emotional core of the story. Their interactions conveyed both affection and frustration, mirroring the complexities of real-life close friendships. Many viewers related to the dynamic of being protective of a friend while also questioning their judgment, which added an extra layer of realism to the otherwise heightened setting. The supporting cast, though smaller in screen time, enriched the story. Kyle MacLachlan's presence as a shadowy figure in Slater's circle carried immense weight, drawing on his history of enigmatic roles in David Lynch's projects. His measured performance hinted at broader conspiracies without over-explaining them, leaving audiences to speculate about his true role in Slater's empire. Haley Joel Osment, meanwhile, brought an unexpected mix of cynicism and comedy to his character, providing moments of relief that were tinged with discomfort. The casting choices overall reflected Gravitz's vision of populating the film with actors capable of layering nuance into archetypal roles. The production design deserves particular attention, as it was one of the most carefully constructed aspects of the film. The island itself was as much a character as any of the actors. Designers intentionally contrasted spaces of excessive gleaming villas, infinity pools, private yachts with more barren and isolating backdrops like cliffs, caves, and dense jungle. This juxtaposition reinforced the film's themes of surface-level allure masking underlying danger. Subtle details added to the unease: hallways that seemed slightly too long, rooms that felt sterile despite their luxury, and decor choices that reflected control rather than comfort. Audiences often remarked on how the film made them feel disoriented, as though they too were guests in a space designed to impress but not to welcome. Cinematography worked hand in hand with this design. Early scenes used wide shots and steady framing to emphasize openness, while later sequences relied on tighter close-ups, handheld cameras, and sudden shifts in focus to create anxiety. The camera often lingered just a little too long on certain details, inviting the viewer to question what was being hidden. Mirrors and reflective surfaces were used strategically to suggest duplicity and distortion, reinforcing the film's theme of appearances being unreliable. The contrast between natural light during the day and artificial lighting at night further highlighted the divide between the island's apparent paradise and its lurking dangers. The editing style was deliberately disorienting in places, cutting between glamorous party scenes and quieter, more disturbing moments. This rhythm created a sense of unpredictability, mirroring the characters' own shifting perceptions of the island. Transitions often blended sound from one scene into another, a technique that blurred the boundaries between seduction and threat. The overall effect was to keep audiences slightly off balance, unable to fully relax into the film's world. Musically, the film drew on both original scoring and carefully selected tracks. The score, pulsing with ambient tones and dissonant rhythms, provided an undercurrent of unease. Meanwhile, curated songs for party sequences leaned heavily on contemporary electronic and pop influences, creating moments of escapism that quickly soured as the narrative progressed. Kravitz and her music team paid close attention to how sound could manipulate audience perception, using it not just as background but as an active force in shaping mood. In interviews, Kravitz explained that she wanted the music to reflect both the seduction of wealth and the discomfort of exploitation, often overlapping the two in ways that mirrored the story's themes. The release strategy also played a significant role in shaping the film's trajectory. By premiering theatrically before heading to streaming, Blink Twice tapped into both traditional audiences and newer viewing habits. Its marketing campaign leaned heavily into mystery, using teaser trailers that suggested danger without revealing plot specifics. Posters often featured minimal imagery or eyes, masks, or isolated figures, emphasizing atmosphere rather than narrative. This approach generated speculation online, with fans dissecting each promotional detail for clues. The shift from its original title to Blink Twice became a marketing talking point in itself, fueling discussions about censorship, branding, and artistic intention. Once in theaters, the film drew crowds curious about Zoe Kravitz's directorial debut as well as fans of Channing Tatum eager to see him in a different kind of role. Critical reviews ranged from glowing to sharply divided. Some praised the film as a bold and stylish thriller that marked Kravitz as a director to watch. Others critiqued its pacing or felt its themes were too on the nose. Audiences, however, engaged deeply with the film, debating its ambiguities and interpretations. This dynamic mixed reviews but passionate conversations helped the film achieve a level of cultural endurance that outlasted its box office performance. At the box office, Blink Twice opened respectably, neither a breakout smash nor a disappointment. Its moderate budget allowed it to cover costs relatively quickly, and its international performance bolstered its overall financial success. Streaming platforms amplified its reach, with many viewers discovering it after release and fueling further discussion online. The studio's decision to balance theatrical and streaming availability ultimately worked in the film's favor, ensuring it reached a broad audience without relying solely on ticket sales. Online, memes and social media commentary kept the film alive. The phrase "Blink Twice" became shorthand for discomfort, suspicion, or hidden signals, appearing in jokes, reaction memes, and even political commentary. Still images from the film and Naomi Ackie's skeptical expressions, Channing Tatum's unsettling smile are circulated widely. TikTok edits recut party scenes into comedic or horrifying montages, while Twitter threads compared Slater King to real-world tech moguls, using the film as a satirical lens on current events. This viral afterlife made the movie more relevant than many bigger-budget blockbusters that faded quickly from memory. In academic and critical circles, the film invited analysis of gender, power, and consent. Scholars pointed out how the film used the island setting as a metaphor for elite spaces where accountability is erased, and how the women's experiences reflected broader conversations about autonomy in a world dominated by wealth and male privilege. Zoe Kravitz's position as a female director tackling these themes added further weight, as her perspective was seen as vital in shaping how the story unfolded. Whether praised or critiqued, The film was acknowledged as an ambitious debut that aimed to both entertain and provoke thought. Zoe Kravitz's position as a first-time director shaped much of the conversation around Blink Twice. Hollywood has long been scrutinized for how it supports or restricts women moving into the director's chair, and Kravitz's debut was seen as both a personal milestone and a broader statement about representation behind the camera. Industry observers noted that she entered directing with significant advantages: her established reputation as an actor, her connections, and her ability to attract a strong cast, but also with unique pressures. Every creative choice she made would be dissected not only for artistic merit but also as a sign of what kind of filmmaker she might become. Kravitz's vision for the project reflected her years of observation as an actor working under different directors. She often mentioned in interviews that she wanted to create an environment where actors felt safe and encouraged to explore without judgment. This approach was especially important given the film's subject matter, which dealt with manipulation, consent, and exploitation. She structured rehearsals and discussions around building trust between cast members, ensuring that emotionally intense scenes could be performed without discomfort. The result was a set environment that many actors later described as collaborative and unusually supportive for a thriller of this nature. Behind the scenes, production challenges tested the crew's adaptability. Shooting on a tropical island required extensive coordination, with weather, tides, and natural light constantly influencing the schedule. The lush location added authenticity but also introduced logistical difficulties. Transportation of equipment to remote areas was expensive and time-consuming, and unexpected storms occasionally halted filming. Crew members had to be resourceful, improvising solutions to maintain continuity. These obstacles, though stressful, reportedly fostered a strong sense of camaraderie among the team. Cast members later said that the unpredictability of the environment mirrored their characters' experiences of isolation and unease, helping them stay connected to the film's tone. Channing Tatum, as both star and producer, played a significant role beyond his on-screen presence. His production input was instrumental in shaping the film's budget management and distribution strategy. Tatum's involvement ensured that the film maintained a balance between being an auteur-driven project and a commercially viable thriller. He was said to be deeply committed to Zoe Kravitz's vision, often stepping in to advocate for creative choices when studio executives raised concerns. This professional partnership between Kravitz and Tatum, who had also become a high-profile couple off-screen, fueled media attention but also raised questions about how personal and professional dynamics intersected in the making of the film. Naomi Ackie's preparation for her role as Frida involved significant research into power dynamics, social manipulation, and the psychology of survival. She studied real-life cases of individuals who had navigated coercive environments, as well as accounts of women who had been targeted by wealthy and powerful figures. Ackie aimed to portray Frida not as a passive observer but as a character constantly analyzing her surroundings and seeking agency. This informed her physicality on screen, her posture, her gaze, her hesitation before speaking, all of which subtly conveyed that Frida was processing danger even when she seemed relaxed. Akkie's attention to detail became one of the film's standout features, grounding its more sensational elements in emotional truth. Adria Arjona approached Sarah from a different angle, focusing on the allure of risk and the thrill of indulgence. Arjona described her character as someone who believed she was always in control, even when she wasn't. This tension between confidence and vulnerability made Sarah compelling to watch. Her choices often frustrated audiences, but they were rooted in a recognizable human impulse, the desire to believe that danger can be managed or avoided through charm and quick thinking. Arjona balanced this with moments of fear that cracked Sarah's fate. Section 8, making her more relatable despite her recklessness. One of the production's most carefully designed sequences was the first major party scene on Slater King's Island. This sequence had to encapsulate the film's duality, dazzling glamour concealing quiet menace. The set design featured luxurious DA copyright core, high fashion, and decadent food displays, all lit in warm golden hues to emphasize indulgence. At the same time, The choreography of extras and the rhythm of the camera suggested unease. Some characters lingered too long in the background, conversations cut off abruptly, and shots of the ocean emphasized isolation. The sound design layered thumping music with barely audible unsettling tones, planting subconscious discomfort in the audience. This party sequence became emblematic of the film's style: enticing, beautiful, and faintly horrifying. Another production highlight was the climactic confrontation sequence, which Kravitz directed with precision. The editing quickened, the lighting darkened, and the camera movements became more erratic, reflecting the breakdown of illusions. Actors described filming this scene as emotionally exhausting, requiring multiple takes to capture both physical struggle and psychological intensity. Kravitz worked closely with her cinematographer to ensure that every shot conveyed not just action but also thematic resonance, the collapse of power built on lies and manipulation. When the film moved into post-production, the editing team had to navigate the challenge of maintaining suspense without overwhelming viewers. Early cuts reportedly leaned too heavily on fast pacing, which risked undercutting the film's slower, more atmospheric build-up. Kravitz insisted on rebalancing the edit to allow quieter moments to breathe, even if it meant a longer runtime. The final cut reflected this compromise, tense and propulsive but punctuated by reflective pauses. The decision paid off for audiences who appreciated the film's willingness to linger in unease rather than rushing toward resolution. The score and soundtrack further elevated the final product. Composer Joseph Strapansky, known for blending electronic textures with orchestral elements, crafted a soundscape that mirrored the island's dual nature. Ambient pulses suggested seduction, while sharp strings or distorted synths intruded to signal danger. The score was intentionally manipulative, lulling audiences into moments of calm before jolting them with sonic disruptions. Selected tracks from contemporary artists provided cultural grounding, especially in party sequences, where recognizable songs reinforced realism. Critics praised the film's music as one of its most effective storytelling tools, a constant reminder that beneath beauty lay danger. The film's release coincided with ongoing cultural conversations about wealth, consent, and the exploitation of power. Audiences naturally drew connections between the fictional Slater King and real-world figures whose public personas masked troubling behavior. This intertextual resonance amplified the film's impact, as viewers used it as a lens to critique society. Social media became a space where fans dissected scenes, traded interpretations, and linked the film to broader issues. The virality of Blink Twice memes only amplified this engagement, ensuring that the film transcended its runtime to become a cultural shorthand. While critics were split, the discourse itself ensured that Blink Twice stayed relevant. Some praised its style and thematic daring, while others critiqued its execution as uneven. But even negative reviews often acknowledged Kravitz's ambition, recognizing the film as a bold debut rather than a safe one. This distinction mattered, as it set her apart from directors who choose less controversial or complex material for their first projects. For many, the film represented not just a story on screen but also a statement of intent from a new filmmaker determined to challenge both audiences and industry norms. The conversation around Blink Twice deepened in the months following its release as audiences began to parse its layers beyond the immediate thrills of the story. What began as a glossy, star-driven thriller was increasingly recognized as a study of systemic manipulation, disguised beneath a glamorous exterior. This duality ensured that the film's relevance endured even as other 2024 releases faded from public memory. Zoe Kravitz's work was continually cited in think pieces and academic essays about cinema's ongoing relationship with wealth, gender, and consent. Box office performance revealed a fascinating trajectory. The film's domestic opening weekend numbers were solid but not spectacular, with many industry analysts initially labeling it a modest performer. However, its international release proved stronger than expected, particularly in European markets where audiences tend to embrace stylized psychological thrillers more readily. France and the United Kingdom, for example, accounted for significant overseas earnings, with critics praising the film's mixture of glamour and critique. In Germany, its run extended longer than projected, benefiting from strong word of mouth among younger audiences intrigued by its themes. Streaming platforms further elevated its profile once it became available for home viewing. The film surged into trending charts across multiple countries. This second wave of viewership helped it recoup production costs and secure profitability. Breaking down audience demographics revealed additional insights. Younger viewers, particularly those in the 18-34 age bracket, were the most enthusiastic, connecting the story to their concerns about power imbalances and exploitation. Social media played a major role in amplifying these perspectives, with discussions about toxic relationships, coercion, and the dangers of unchecked wealth being tied to characters and scenes in the film. Older audiences responded differently, often focusing more on the film's visual style and thriller mechanics than on its social commentary. This split in perception highlighted the film's ability to operate on multiple levels, appealing both as a surface-level suspense story and as a layered critique for those inclined to dig deeper. Critics across different regions reflected this diversity of response. American critics tended to divide along two lines: those who applauded the film's ambition and stylish execution, and those who felt its themes were handled too directly. European critics were generally more favorable, appreciating its willingness to mix spectacle with satire. In Latin America, the film sparked discussions about parallels between fictional elites and real-world political corruption, with several cultural commentators noting how the island setting resonated with histories of secrecy and exploitation tied to luxury retreats in their own regions. Asian markets were slower to embrace the film theatrically but responded more strongly once it hit streaming, where younger, globally connected audiences elevated its visibility through online discussions. Awards season brought renewed attention, though the film was not positioned as a traditional Oscar contender. Instead, it found recognition in categories celebrating debut filmmakers and breakthrough performances. Naomi Ackie received multiple nominations from critics' circles, with several awarding her Best Actress accolades. Zoe Kravitz was celebrated as an emerging director at various film festivals, solidifying her reputation as a new voice to watch. Even where the film did not win, its presence on shortlists and in nominations lists reinforced its artistic legitimacy and helped counterbalance critiques that it was too uneven. Beyond the numbers and accolades, the cultural afterlife of Blink Twice might be its most enduring legacy. The memification of Blink Twice took on a life of its own, extending far beyond the film's plot. It became a digital shorthand for signaling discomfort or suspicion, often employed humorously but sometimes with genuine social commentary. Memes used it to reference everything from awkward family dinners to political scandals. This transformation of a cinematic phrase into an internet-wide language demonstrated the unpredictable ways films can intersect with broader culture. Even those who had not seen the movie understood the meme, which in turn encouraged some to seek out the film later. The symbolism within the story also invited extensive analysis. Scholars dissected the use of the island as a metaphorical device. On the surface, it represented paradisy wealth, beauty, exclusivity. But as the narrative unfolded, it revealed itself as a prison, reflecting how structures of privilege often isolate those within them as much as they exclude those outside. The island's design reinforced this paradox: open expanses of beach and sky that nonetheless trapped characters, creating a sense of entrapment within vastness. Similarly, the architecture of Slater King's villa embodied both allure and sterility, suggesting that beneath all the beauty was an emptiness that mirrored his hollow morality. The dynamic between Frida and Slater became central to critical readings. Their interactions highlighted how manipulation often operates through subtle cues rather than overt threats. Slater rarely had to raise his voice or resort to aggression. Instead, his charm, wealth, and control of the environment did much of the work for him. This reflected broader conversations about coercion and how systems of power enable exploitation without direct force. Frida's gradual realization of this manipulation, and her efforts to resist it, formed the emotional backbone of the film. Her arc from fascination to disillusionment to survival resonated strongly with audiences, particularly women who related to navigating similar dynamics in less extreme real-world contexts. The friendship between Frida and Sarah added another layer of thematic richness. Their bond was both a source of strength and a site of tension. Sarah's willingness to indulge in the island's pleasures contrasted with Frida's growing caution, creating friction that many audiences found painfully realistic. Friendships often strain under external pressures, and the film captured this truth without oversimplification. Critics noted how this relationship grounded the story, preventing it from becoming a purely abstract allegory about wealth and power. Instead, it remained rooted in the deeply human emotions of loyalty, trust, and fear. Zoe Kravitz's directing choices also drew attention for their aesthetic influences. Observers identified echoes of Stanley Kubrick in her framing and use of symmetry, as well as nods to Sofia Coppola in the way she captured ennui and excess. Yet she blended these influences into a style uniquely her own, emphasizing the tactile feel of environments and the emotional weight of silence. Her willingness to let scenes play out without dialogue, relying on body language and atmosphere, set her apart from many debut directors who lean on exposition. These stylistic decisions marked her as a filmmaker unafraid to trust her audience, even at the risk of alienating some. The long-term impact of Blink Twice lies in how it inserted itself into ongoing cultural conversations. It was not just consumed as entertainment but engaged with as a commentary on pressing issues: the dangers of unchecked power, the subtleties of coercion, and the hollowness of wealth. For some, it was a stylish thriller that delivered suspense. For others, it was a sharp critique of modern elites and the systems that protect them. This dual capacity ensured its relevance across different audience groups. In time, the film's legacy may be less about its financial performance and more about how it positioned Zoe Kravitz as a filmmaker. She proved she could craft a work that was both entertaining and provocative, glamorous yet unsettling. Her debut placed her among a new generation of directors willing to blur the line between mainstream cinema and auteur-driven critique. For many viewers, Blink Twice was not just a movie but a signal that Kravitz had entered the conversation as a creative force with something to say and the skill to say it in her own voice. One of the most striking elements of Blink Twice is how it manages to balance being a highly stylized thriller with being a psychological study that lingers on the audience long after the credits roll. To expand upon its enduring impact, it is necessary to explore the way in which the narrative structure interacts with themes of power, control, and illusion, and how those elements intertwine with its production journey, casting choices, and ultimate reception. While some thrillers rely heavily on shock or violent confrontation, this film instead grounds its suspense in a sense of disorientation and escalating unease. The story unfolds gradually, giving the viewer the illusion of control before slowly pulling the rug out from beneath them, mirroring the character's experience within the world of Slater King's Island. The casting decisions amplified this effect. Channing Tatum, known for his charisma and physicality, played against type by inhabiting a role where charm became a weapon. Rather than relying on overt menace, his Slater King exerted power by smiling, offering luxuries, and inviting others into his world. This subversion made his performance particularly chilling, as audiences accustomed to his more comedic or heroic roles had to grapple with the discomfort of finding him both appealing and repellent at the same time. Naomi Ackie, by contrast, embodied vulnerability and intelligence, guiding viewers into the narrative's unfolding dangers. Her performance grounded the film emotionally, preventing it from drifting into abstraction. By choosing actors whose personas carried specific cultural weight, Zoe Kravitz heightened the resonance of the characters' journeys. Filming locations became almost characters themselves. The lush island setting, with its pristine beaches, sparkling waters, and luxurious villas, was chosen not merely for aesthetic appeal but for thematic resonance. Kravitz and her production team intentionally sought environments that evoked both wonder and unease. The island's beauty lured both characters and audiences into a sense of security, but as the story progressed, the same landscapes that once signified freedom began to feel suffocating. Wide shots of the ocean emphasized entrapment rather than liberation. Architectural details, sleek hallways, minimalist interiors, and hidden rooms conveyed both sophistication and sterility. By investing heavily in location scouting and production design, the filmmakers ensured that the island did not simply provide a backdrop but actively participated in the story's psychological landscape. Music played a similarly vital role. The score combined contemporary electronic elements with more traditional orchestral motifs, creating a soundscape that mirrored the tension between allure and dread. Early sequences featured light, playful rhythms that underscored the characters' initial fascination with the island's glamour. As events darkened, these melodies warped into dissonant echoes, subtly signaling to audiences that appearances were deceiving. Kravitz collaborated with her composers to ensure the score avoided melodrama, instead focusing on restraint and mood. Moments of silence were strategically employed to heighten unease, particularly during key confrontations between Frida and Slater. This sonic minimalism invited audiences to lean forward, listening for meaning in what was left unsaid. The film's release strategy also shaped its impact. Marketed as both a stylish thriller and a socially relevant drama, it targeted diverse audience segments. Trailers highlighted its glamour and suspense, but marketing campaigns also hinted at deeper themes, positioning the film as more than just entertainment. Social media promotions leaned into the blink twice motif, encouraging users to post videos or photos where they signal discomfort by blinking. This viral campaign blurred the line between marketing and meme culture, making the film part of broader digital conversations before its release. By the time it hit theaters, Blink Twice had already secured a place in online discourse, ensuring strong initial interest. Reception reflected the duality of its design. Some critics praised it as a confident debut, applauding Kravitz for her directorial vision and willingness to tackle uncomfortable themes. Others found it uneven, pointing to pacing issues or arguing that its social critique sometimes overshadowed its narrative momentum. However, even detractors acknowledged its ambition, recognizing that it aimed for more than many genre contemporaries. For audiences, the film became a conversation starter, sparking debates not just about its plot but about broader cultural issues. Friend groups, online forums, and classrooms all used it as a lens through which to discuss topics of privilege, exploitation, and manipulation. Box office performance evolved in surprising ways. Initial domestic returns suggested it might perform modestly, but the film's endurance at the box office outstripped expectations. Strong word of mouth among younger demographics extended its run, while international audiences, particularly in Europe and Latin America, embraced it more quickly. Streaming platforms further amplified its visibility, with many discovering it at home and adding to the ongoing cultural conversation. Unlike blockbuster franchises, Blink Twice succeeded by embedding itself into social consciousness, ensuring that its afterlife would be longer than its theatrical run. The cultural analysis of the film often returned to its symbolism. The island functioned as a microcosm of systemic inequality, beautiful, alluring, and exclusive, but built upon exploitation and secrecy. The act of blinking twice became shorthand for recognizing danger within luxury, an acknowledgement that beneath glamour often lies corruption. This symbolism proved potent beyond the film itself, resonating with real-world discussions about elite enclaves, corporate power, and hidden abuses. Academics drew parallels between the film's setting and historical patterns of colonialism, pointing out how paradise for some often comes at the expense of others. Performance analysis reinforced these themes. Naomi Aki's Frida became a symbol of resistance, her growing awareness and survival instincts mirroring the audience's own realization. Channing Tatum's Slater embodied the subtlety of manipulation, relying on charm and control rather than overt aggression. Supporting performances, particularly from Adria Arjona and Kyle MacLachlan, added texture, portraying characters complicit in maintaining systems of exploitation. Their roles demonstrated how enablers and bystanders contribute to abusive environments, even when not directly orchestrating them. As time passed, the film's memification only grew. The blink twice phrase entered everyday language, applied humorously to situations ranging from bad dates to awkward workplace meetings, but also used sincerely in discussions about unsafe environments. The meme's versatility ensured that it spread widely, often detached from its cinematic origins. This phenomenon echoed what had happened with other films whose lines or symbols outgrew their narratives, demonstrating the unpredictable ways cinema can shape culture. In retrospect, the significance of Blink Twice lies not only in its storytelling but in its ability to blur the boundaries between entertainment and cultural critique. It exemplified how film can operate on multiple levels: thrilling, glamorous, unsettling, and socially resonant depending on how deeply one chooses to engage. For Zoe Kravitz, it established her not just as an actor-turned-director but as a filmmaker with vision, capable of balancing style and substance. Its lasting influence will likely be felt less in raw financial numbers and more in the conversations it continues to inspire, as audiences revisit its imagery, performances, and themes in the years ahead. A scene-by-scene exploration of Blink Twice reveals just how carefully Zoe Kravitz structured the story to build tension, layer meaning, and guide the viewer through a journey that appears glamorous on the surface but hides disturbing truths beneath. By breaking down the key sequences, one begins to see how the film operates almost like a slow unraveling, where every smile, every indulgent moment, and every silence is weighted with implication. The opening scene establishes the mood immediately. We are introduced to Frida, played by Naomi Ackie, in a bustling city environment, working in a position that underscores her financial precarity and distance from the luxury that will soon define her world. The framing is intimate, often lingering on her face, capturing a sense of longing and unease. The sound design emphasizes noisy cars, chatter, the din of urban life here contrasting sharply with the silence and stillness of the island that will later dominate the narrative. This juxtaposition between chaos and calm mirrors the illusion of safety that Slater King's Paradise will offer. The inciting incident occurs when Frida and Sarah are invited to a lavish party, a scene that bursts with excess. The party sequence is deliberately disorienting, with flickering lights, pulsing music, and a camera that glides fluidly through the crowd. It is here that Slater King makes his first appearance. Channing Tatum's introduction is understated, as he does not command attention through volume or violence but rather through charisma. His presence is magnetic, and the camera lingers on him just long enough to signal his importance without overstating it. The invitation to his private island is delivered casually, almost like an afterthought, reinforcing his control over the situation. He does not need to convince, he simply offers, knowing the allure of his world will be enough. The arrival on the island marks a shift in tone. Sunlight dominates the frame, and the cinematography emphasizes wide, open spaces. At first, this openness feels liberating. Characters laugh, swim, and drink, the camera capturing their joy with an almost dreamlike quality. The score during these sequences is upbeat yet slightly off-kilter, a faint reminder that something is not quite right. The use of color is particularly striking. Bright blues and whites dominate, representing purity and freedom, but soon these hues begin to feel sterile and overwhelming, reflecting the artificial perfection of the environment. As days pass, subtle cracks begin to appear. One key sequence involves a dinner scene, where conversation drifts into uncomfortable territory. Slater's comments, delivered with a smile, contain an undercurrent of menace. His control becomes more apparent, as he guides the conversation and subtly mocks dissenting opinions. Frida notices these shifts, her reactions captured in lingering close-ups. Silence becomes a weapon here, with pauses in dialogue stretching just a beat too long, creating unease. Another critical sequence occurs when Frida explores the island alone. Wide shots emphasize her smallness against the vast landscape, while the sound design grows quiet, almost unnervingly so. She discovers areas of the island that are off-limits, raising questions about what is hidden from view. These explorations are not overtly confrontational, but they plant seeds of doubt in both her and the audience. The island, once a paradise, now begins to resemble a labyrinth. The tension escalates when a party turns darker. Music swells, drinks flow, and the atmosphere tips from celebration into excess. The editing becomes faster, disorienting the viewer, while the score shifts into discordant tones. It is during this sequence that Frida witnesses moments of coercion and realizes the darker undercurrents of Slater's world. This realization is not immediate but gradual, conveyed through glances, fragmented conversations, and half-seen actions. The film avoids sensationalism, instead relying on suggestion and atmosphere to convey danger. The climax builds as Frida confronts the reality of her situation. A confrontation between her and Slater is staged not with physical violence but with psychological intensity. Tatum's performance here is chilling, his charm giving way to a cold, calculated menace. The setting, an immaculate, sterile room within the villa, heightens the tension, as if stripping away the glamour to reveal the hollow core beneath. Frida's defiance, quiet but resolute, carries immense weight. Naomi Ackie's performance in these moments crystallizes her character's arc, transforming from curiosity and attraction to survival and resistance. The resolution does not offer easy answers. The island remains beautiful, the villa intact, but the illusion has shattered. Frida's survival is not triumphant in the traditional sense but instead laced with trauma and hard-earned clarity. The closing shots mirror the opening, returning to the city, returning to noisy but now with a shift in perspective. The world has not changed, but Frida has, and the viewer carries the weight of her journey. Beyond narrative progression, each scene invites thematic interpretation. The repeated motif of blinking, sometimes subtle, sometimes overt, functions as both a literal action and a metaphor. To blink twice is to acknowledge what cannot be said aloud, a silent plea for recognition. Kravitz employs this motif not only in dialogue but in visual language, often framing characters' eyes in moments of tension. This recurring image reinforces the film's central concern with perception, silence, and the hidden costs of survival. The character arcs deepen the film's impact. Frida evolves from an outsider drawn into wealth salute to a survivor who sees its corrupting core. Sarah's arc contrasts with hers, showing how complicity can emerge from denial or desire for comfort. Slater remains consistent, embodying the systems of power that thrive on charm and control. Supporting characters highlight different facets of complicity, as some knowingly participate in exploitation, while others willfully ignore it. Together, these arcs form a tapestry of how individuals interact with systems of privilege and abuse. The audience's engagement with these scenes is key to the film's endurance. Viewers found themselves dissecting each choice, why a silence lasted as long as it did, why the camera lingered on certain images, why the score warped at specific moments. This encouraged repeat viewings, with audiences noticing new details each time. Discussions online often revolved around interpretations of particular scenes, with fans debating whether certain moments represented genuine kindness, manipulation, or foreshadowing. The long-term cultural footprint of Blink Twice is inseparable from its meticulous scene construction. Each sequence builds not only narrative tension but also thematic depth, inviting analysis long after viewing. This careful craftsmanship explains why the film continues to resonate, becoming more than just a thriller and instead transforming into a cultural text that reflects broader anxieties about power, wealth, and silence. What makes Blink Twice remarkable is how much of its power lies not in spectacle but in implication. The film works like a mirror, reflecting cultural anxieties about wealth, celebrity, gendered power, and hidden abuse, while never outright lecturing the audience. This balance between narrative suspense and social commentary ensures that it rewards deeper engagement while still functioning as an accessible thriller. To move toward the full scale of its impact, it helps to examine its symbolism in greater detail, its character psychology, and its broader cinematic context. The symbolism of the island is central to the film's meaning. At first glance, it is paradise, sun-drenched beaches, crystalline water, luxurious architecture, and an atmosphere of freedom. But beneath this veneer, The island represents isolation, entrapment, and control. Kravitz plays with the paradox of a wide-open environment that nonetheless serves as a prison. Characters are surrounded by vast seas that look endless but actually cut off any hope of escape. This duality reflects the dynamics of toxic relationships and power structure, so what appears liberating often conceals a trap. The geography itself becomes part of the psychological warfare, with restricted areas suggesting hidden truths and reinforcing Slater's control. Water, a recurring motif, deepens the symbolic layering. At times it suggests cleansing and renewal, with scenes of characters swimming or lounging near the ocean. Yet it also embodies danger and suffocation, representing both freedom and the impossibility of escape. Shots of characters staring into the horizon emphasize their yearning for liberation while simultaneously underscoring their captivity. In one striking sequence, Frida stands alone at the water's edge, the waves crashing around her, the sound design amplifying the roar of the sea. The scene captures both her longing for escape and the futility of her situation. Architecture plays a similar role. The villa where much of the story unfolds is sleek, minimalist, and seemingly transparent, with glass walls and open spaces. But this openness becomes suffocating rather than liberating. Glass, meant to symbolize clarity, becomes a barrier that both reveals and conceals. Characters can be seen but not reached, their private moments on display yet untouchable. This architectural choice underscores themes of surveillance, control, and the illusion of transparency in elite environments. The motif of blinking itself transcends its literal function. On the surface, it is a small, almost involuntary gesture, but in the film it becomes a symbol of silent communication, resistance, and recognition. To blink twice is to signal distress without speaking, a way to break silence in environments where words are dangerous. Kravitz embeds this motif visually throughout the film, lingering close-ups on eyes, characters exchanging glances that carry unspoken meaning, and even the editing style, with quick cuts that mimic the rhythm of blinking. By elevating such a small action into a recurring symbol, the film suggests how subtle gestures can carry immense weight in oppressive systems. From a psychological perspective, the characters embody archetypes that reflect real-world dynamics. Frida is the observer-turned-survivor, initially drawn by allure but ultimately able to see through illusion. Her arc reflects the process of awakening to exploitation, and moving from naivety and curiosity to fear, then resistance, and finally survival. Sarah, in contrast, represents denial and complicity. Her desire to embrace pleasure blinds her to danger, showing how individuals often choose comfort over confronting uncomfortable truths. This dynamic between Frida and Sarah mirrors real-life tensions in friendships and relationships, where people may respond to abuse or exploitation differently based on their thresholds for denial and confrontation. Slater King represents the archetype of the manipulative abuser, cloaked in charm and wealth. His psychology is defined not by overt violence but by control, entitlement, and the belief that his world is unassailable. Tatum's performance captures this chilling dynamic, never needing to raise his voice, because the environment, the wealth, and the complicity of others do the work for him. His character reflects how systems of exploitation often rely less on brute force than on a carefully cultivated ecosystem of silence, privilege, and seduction. Supporting characters illustrate varying degrees of complicity. Some knowingly enable Slater's abuse, benefiting from proximity to his wealth and power. Others maintain plausible deniability, choosing not to question what they see. Together, they form a network of enablers, reflecting how exploitation rarely operates in isolation. Kravitz uses these characters to demonstrate that silence and passivity can be as damaging as direct participation. In terms of cinematic context, Blink Twice can be compared to works like Jordan Peele's Get Out or Emerald Fennell's Promising Young Woman. All three films blend genre storytelling with social critique, using thriller conventions to expose systems of exploitation. Kravitz's film, however, carves its own path by focusing less on shock and more on atmosphere, relying on slow-building unease rather than overt spectacle. It also draws upon a lineage of films about the sinister undercurrents of wealth and privilege, From Stanley Kubrick's Eyes Wide Shut to Sofia Coppola's The Bling Ring. Like those works, it interrogates the allure of wealth while exposing its moral emptiness. Audience psychology is equally fascinating to explore. Many viewers reported feeling complicit while watching the film, seduced by the island's beauty even as they knew something darker lurked beneath. This mirrors the character's own journey, pulling the audience into the same web of allure and unease. Online discussions often revolved around this discomfort, how viewers found themselves enjoying the glamour even as they recognized its toxicity. This effect demonstrates the film's success in making audiences feel what the characters feel, blurring the line between entertainment and critique. The film's endurance owes much to its cultural resonance. It arrived at a moment when conversations about power, abuse, and privilege were still very present in public discourse. Audiences recognized echoes of real-world scandals in its narrative, making it feel timely and urgent. Yet by embedding these themes within a glamorous thriller, Kravitz ensured that it reached a wide audience rather than remaining confined to explicitly political cinema. This balance helped it find footing both as entertainment and as a cultural text. Its afterlife in meme culture further extended its relevance. Blink Twice quickly became shorthand across social media for signaling discomfort in everyday situations. While often used humorously or applied to bad dates, awkward work meetings, or family gatherings, it also retained its serious undertones, employed in conversations about unsafe environments or toxic relationships. This dual use ensured that the phrase remained flexible and widespread, giving the film a legacy beyond its box office run. Few debut films achieve this level of cultural penetration, and it speaks to the power of Kravitz's central motif. Ultimately, Blink Twice achieves something rare. It entertains, unsettles, critiques, and endures. Its combination of glamorous surface and disturbing core ensures that it remains a film to be discussed, dissected, and revisited. Kravitz's directorial voice emerges clearly as stylish yet substantive, playful yet serious, willing to trust her audience's intelligence while challenging their comfort. As her career unfolds, Blink Twice will likely be remembered as the bold debut that announced her not just as a filmmaker, but as a storyteller unafraid to shine a light on the shadows behind the glittering facade of wealth and charm. One of the most rewarding ways to extend the conversation about Blink Twice is to look more closely at its technical construction. While audiences often remember the story, characters, and performances, the underlying craft is what makes the film's mood so enduring and its critique so sharp. Zoe Kravitz's team paid meticulous attention to cinematography, editing, costuming, and sound design, all of which worked in tandem to build a sense of disorientation that defines the viewing experience. The cinematography, led by an experienced director of photography, draws heavily on contrasts. Early sequences in the city are handheld, crowded, and warm-toned, capturing Frida's grounded but limited life. Once the narrative shifts to Slater King's Island, the palette changes dramatically. Bright natural light floods the screen, with wide, symmetrical shots emphasizing openness and perfection. But as tension builds, the same techniques are inverted, the light becomes blinding rather than freeing, and symmetry begins to feel sterile and claustrophobic. Kravitz and her DP also leaned on close-ups of eyes and hands, reinforcing the themes of perception and silent communication. The camera often lingers on characters not speaking, allowing unease to settle in through body language rather than dialogue. Editing choices amplify this sense of creeping dread. The film avoids traditional thriller rhythms where tension spikes and releases in predictable cycles. Instead, editing creates a slow drip of unease, with long takes that let discomfort simmer. At key points, cuts mimic the blink motif, a quick, almost imperceptible interruptions in the visual flow, as if the viewer themselves is signaling distress. In party sequences, the editing speeds up, disorienting viewers with rapid transitions that mirror intoxication and loss of control. But in quieter, more disturbing moments, the pace slows, forcing the audience to sit with discomfort. This dynamic range of pacing keeps viewers on edge, unsure of when the next escalation will occur. Costuming is another layer of symbolism. At the beginning, Frida and Sarah's clothing emphasizes relatability, a casual, urban outfits that root them in a familiar world. On the island, costumes shift into glamorous swimwear, elegant dresses, and chic resort attire, reflecting the allure of Slater's paradise. Yet as the story darkens, these outfits take on a sinister undertone. Frida's clothing begins to look more restrictive, her bright colors replaced with muted tones, signaling her growing alienation. Slater's wardrobe is carefully crafted as well, always crisp, casual in appearance but immaculately maintained, embodying the effortlessness of privilege. His clothing never betrays vulnerability, reinforcing his role as the orchestrator of illusions. Supporting characters' wardrobes also reinforce hierarchy. Those closest to Slater mirror his effortless wealth, while those further down the social ladder wear more flamboyant or revealing attire, suggesting their expendability. Sound design works hand in hand with visuals to sustain tension. Early scenes on the island feature layered soundscapes of laughter, waves, and soft music, creating an intoxicating sense of luxury. But as the film progresses, these sounds are gradually stripped away, leaving emptiness. Silence becomes one of the most powerful tools, particularly in scenes where danger is implied but not shown. The absence of music forces the audience to confront the unease directly. When music is employed, it often subverts expectation. For example, a cheerful tune might accompany a moment of manipulation, creating a chilling dissonance. This careful sonic construction ensures that the audience feels the tension not just intellectually but physically. Festival reception also played a role in shaping the film's reputation. Premiering at a major international festival, Blink Twice was greeted with curiosity, largely due to Kravitz's debut status and the star power of her cast. Early reviews were mixed but engaged, with critics acknowledging its ambition even if they disagreed on execution. Some hailed it as a stylish new voice in cinema, while others found it uneven, but nearly all agreed it was provocative. The film quickly became one of the festival's most discussed entries, with panels and Q&A sessions delving into its themes of power and exploitation. Kravitz herself spoke candidly in interviews about wanting to blend entertainment with critique, situating herself as part of a new wave of filmmakers using genre cinema to explore urgent cultural questions. The box office trajectory, when viewed in hindsight, reflects how festival buzz fed into general release. Though its opening numbers were modest, critical conversations generated curiosity, especially among younger, socially aware audiences. Internationally, the film's stylish aesthetics helped market it as a piece of glamorous escapism, while its deeper commentary drew in audiences who wanted substance beneath the style. Streaming ensured a second life, particularly as viewers who missed its theatrical run discovered it through online chatter and recommendations. A comparison with films that similarly merge glamour and unease clarifies its place in cinema. Like Eyes Wide Shut, it explores the sinister side of wealth through stylish surfaces. Like The White Lotus, though a series rather than a film, it critiques the privileged class within a confined, isolated setting. Like Get Out, it uses genre conventions to probe deeper social issues. Yet Blink Twice maintains a distinct identity by leaning into female subjectivity, placing Frida's perspective at the center and using her gaze to navigate the seductive but toxic world around her. This perspective is crucial. The film resists objectifying her, instead framing her as both observer and survivor. The psychological arcs of the characters resonate precisely because they are so carefully aligned with these technical choices. Frida's growing suspicion is paralleled by shifts in sound and lighting. Slater's control is reinforced by the stability of his costuming and framing. Sarah's denial is visually represented through her immersion in color, glitter, and noise, contrasting with Frida's increasing movement into muted, silent spaces. These details ensure that character psychology is not just performed by actors but reinforced through every layer of craft. In terms of legacy, The film has already begun to influence conversations in both pop culture and film criticism. The phrase "blink twice" has entered the cultural lexicon, often detached from its cinematic roots. Memes, TikTok edits, and social media posts keep it alive, ensuring that the film remains part of online discourse. At the same time, academic interest has grown, with early scholarly essays analyzing its portrayal of coercion, luxury, and complicity. For a debut film, this dual legacy both as a meme generator and as an object of critical study is impressive and suggests that its influence will endure. Ultimately, Blink Twice thrives because it operates on multiple registers at once. It can be watched as a stylish thriller, a psychological drama, a social critique, or even a cultural phenomenon. This multiplicity is rare, especially for a first-time director. Kravitz proved not only that she could manage a star-studded cast and deliver a visually striking film, but also that she could infuse it with meaning that resonates beyond the screen. That is why the film continues to be discussed. It is not just about what happens on the island but about what the island represents in the real world. Frida, as embodied by Naomi Ackie, is the audience's anchor. Her journey is not simply about survival but about perception, the process of learning to see beneath illusions. At the beginning of the film, she represents aspiration as she is grounded in reality yet drawn to the promise of something more glamorous, something better. This is crucial to the story's resonance because most viewers can recognize themselves in that desire for a life beyond limitations. Frida's vulnerability is not a flaw, it is a human impulse toward beauty, freedom, and opportunity. What makes her arc so powerful is how she learns to separate genuine possibility from dangerous manipulation. Psychologically, she embodies what trauma theorists describe as hypervigilancy, the state of constantly scanning for threats in an environment that looks safe but is not. The film visually reinforces this by focusing on her eyes, often showing her observing before speaking, noticing cracks in Slater's carefully curated paradise before anyone else. By the end, her strength is not in brute force but in awareness, in her refusal to be seduced by the illusion any longer.